Raise your hand if you cannot hear me. All right, perfect. Let's get right into it. UX in the back, party in the front. Do raise your hand if you ever had made a beautiful design, it was perfect, and then weeks or months later you came back and they made the project that you designed, and then it looked like a monster of Frankenstein. Raise your hand. Yes. I see a lot of hands raised. Well, don't worry, because we are here today to help you. We are two developers, so we're here to tell you it's not always your fault. We're going to provide you with some solutions on how to tackle these situations. A little bit more about us. So I told you that we're developers. I'm Ferre, this is Sjouwke. I started the development around 2017, mainly specializing in craft CMS, a backend. And I started at Little Miss Robot just last year. And next to me is Sjouwke. She's also a developer, mainly focused on craft CMS, but has a background in UX and UI.
Yeah. That's correct. And we both work at Little Miss Robot. Now, Little Miss Robot is a digital product design studio, which means that we design and we build digital experiences ranging from applications such as I'm going to stand here. Such as the CMS-systems app, so we made an application that guides you through the museum here in Antwerp. We also make lots of websites. This is an example of a website for a non-profit organization. But we also often make marketing websites for large SaaS companies as well. And we also make lots of other different platforms. I should stand over there, yeah. In front of the, okay. We also make other types of platforms that are linked to different types of apps and websites and things like that. So lots of different digital experiences.
So yeah, you might have wondered, we're seeing two developers here. What are they going to tell us about user experience? Well, actually, we believe that UX applies to anything that affects the user journey to solve a certain problem. So for instance, UX has also a big role in development. Think about micro-interactions, transactions, transitions. Think about SEO. If your site cannot be found, how would they find your beautiful design? Think about accessibility. You could make a very beautiful website, but if people can't use it, it would suck a little bit. So all of these are very important with UX design, but last and not leastly, a backend, a seamless and good to use backend is also very important to have a beautiful website.
And backends happen to be the things that we, like Ferre and I and our fellow developers, are making all day long at Little Miss Robot. So a backend, or what we will refer to today as a CMS or content management system, it's a website that gives our clients the possibility to change and publish and edit their content and publish it to their websites and apps and things like that. Now what you see here is a typical example of such a backend that we make. We usually use Craft CMS for that. You might have heard of it. If you haven't, shame on you, but maybe you've heard of other examples like WordPress or Drupal or any other content management system. The examples today will all be in Craft CMS, but actually everything that we're going to say today will apply to whatever backend system that you use. To get back at the examples that I already gave, so besides the app for the CMS-systems museum, we also created a backend, of which you can see a little snippet here. And via that backend, the client can update and change all the paintings and the tours in the app themselves. And we also make lots of websites. So this is a specific example of a client that can manage all their activities, and they can even manage all the registrations that they receive via the website. So that's what we do at Little Miss Robot.
Yeah, so as Sjouwke told you, we have these beautiful designs, and our job is literally to turn them into code so that it works. but also that we have a backend, so a client can actually use their website, that they can actually update something and don't have to call your company and say, okay, we like to change the text here, can you give us an estimate? No, they want to do it themselves. So our job is to make these backend systems so they can make or update their website. So in conclusion, our job isn't just to deliver the website. It's not just to deliver a beautiful designed front end. It's also our job to make sure that the CMS works, that there is a good CMS that a client can work with. Because on the front end, you have the visual representation, and it's usually seen by the clients of your client. But you mustn't forget the back end. That's the place where the logic and the data lives. This is where your client decides which colors the background is. So the user there is actually the client. And we actually care about the user experience, about those, both of those, the CMS and the front end.
Oh, one back. And that brings us actually to the first blind spot that we want to highlight during this presentation is the focus on UX is usually on the things that we build customly, but the UX in pre-made tools is often overlooked. So we do a lot of user research, prototyping, user testing. We do the whole shebang to make sure that the user experience in our front end is really great. But actually, as developers, we can also have a great impact on those pre-made tools. We don't have 100% impact, but we do have a little bit of that. And that's very important because your backend influences your front end. You might have heard of this example. In 2018, people in Hawaii were getting a false missile alert on their mobile phone. So they had an all caps alert stating that they need to seek immediate shelter. It was not a drill, very alarming, threatening, people were gonna die, but it was actually just a silly mistake. And it happened because the backend was not that clear. It was just a list of options, and it was not very clear which one was more alarming than the other one. So backend is important. Another one is Word. Now, Word is not specifically a website, but you can compare it to any other backend system as well. It's what we call the feature creep. There's lots of features in Word, and you can show them all. At least I'm not sure if you can still do it, but you could do it in the beginning days of Word. But some users just might need a bit of extra guidance because some of them will think like, oh, I have all those options, I should use all of them. And that might create a little Frankensteinish design as well. So it's really important to have a good backend.
Yeah, so we gave these little examples, but what does actually mean a great user experience in the backend? Well, we'll be using these 4 pillars. So we have value, function, the actual usability, and impression. Our first one is value. Does this product give me value? How does this apply to a backend? Well, like I said earlier, if you have a website but you cannot update it, it's rather sucky. You want to change the text, you want to change the background, but the client has to call you. No, they have a backend, they can do it themselves. So the added value is already there. Function, does it work properly? It's very difficult to show options of how it would work if it functions properly, because usually we don't notice it. If it works properly, we don't notice it. But if it doesn't work properly, we notice it. In this example, we're trying to change the background color to red, to pink, to green, some other color. And on the right, we get a live preview, but it doesn't update. So I get frustrated. I don't want to use this anymore. It's not showing what I want. Usability, is it easy to use? On the left is an example for, let's say, me as a backend developer or just a developer in general. All the fields are there. All the info I need from the user to show your beautiful design are there. It's just a title, a text symbol. A client doesn't know where those texts go. So you can help them, guide them to more user-friendly backend systems. You can show them what that field means. You can show them where is it categorized, and so on. If you have 3 of these pillars, you already have quite a great product. But you could go a step further and actually make it even more pleasant. In our case, the CMS that we use is very high maintained, so there's an open source community. The people that are working on the CMS also can suggest new things. So in this tool that we're using, it's very easy to make everything more perfect for our clients and their needs. So we can just send a text to the community and say, we had this ID for the clients, and it might get implemented the next year or maybe in a month.
And that brings us to the second blind spot that we want to highlight during this presentation. We are backenders, but as you might notice, we think about how should we label things, how should we describe things, how should we show things to the user, what options should the user be able to change. So in fact, we are not backend developers, we are backend UXers. Because what happens in the backend and the user experience of your backend directly affects the outcome of your front end. And that can either be a good thing or a bad thing. If your backend is set up very poorly, then the right content is not going to show. It's going to be a weird title. Your images are not going to show. It's going to be a Frankenstein's design. So it's really important to have a good backend.
So we talked about having a good backend to actually provide a good front end. If it works in the backend, then you have a higher chance of having a success in the front end. But it's not like this diagram. We forget one important factor. We have a client in the middle. We can make a beautiful backend, or we can just provide a backend that we think is perfect. We can provide a front end that is perfect, but our client needs to work with it. Our clients need to be able to understand it. And also, in a way, they need to be a little bit of UX designer. They have to use the CMS to make a beautiful website. So that's our third blind spot. The client is also a user. We often do user research. We ask all the questions from the previous talk, but actually, do we also ask them to our clients? In tools that we don't make, in tools that we just set up for them, do we ask the same questions? Do we think about the same pitfalls and the same challenges they might face? So, get to know your client. Not just the client of your client, but also ask the same questions or do the same things you do with the clients of your clients, also with your clients. Because the client will not always tell you or even realize what they need. You have an entire project set up for just the front end, but it could be the same for a backend or another tool. In this example, the client told us, yeah, it's a great backend, but we want to have the possibility to change the entire header. We said, oh, that's a big change from what we designed and what we made, and you agreed to it. And we asked further questions and delved deeper, and then we found out they just didn't like, of course, that their call to action wasn't that visible. They could have changed it by changing the text, making it shorter or everything, but their first conclusion was, we need to have the option to change the entire header. So there we saw a different need than they were actually telling us. Listen to their wants, but also predict their future needs. So we know what they want, but in this case, it's a website where they have the board of directors on it. But we knew, they still have to do the photo shoot. They don't have the pictures of all these members yet. So if a client would go into the CMS, they would start making the website, the image is required. We can't make this page. We can't work with the CMS because we don't have the image yet. So we provided the image to be optional, and a little extra, we included a placeholder. We make a placeholder in their branding. The client started to make the page, and they were like, this is nice to use. You knew that we had the photo shoot, and now we can just make the page without being stopped by the photo shoot.
Yeah. Also, the CMS should speak client and not the other way around. So things that you might see on the left example is like structures, channels, entries, field manager, what the fuck. It means a lot for us as developers, and it's very important to know the different nuances, but it doesn't mean a lot for clients. So sometimes change those labels, maybe simplify them. So that's important. Also provide a human-centered context where possible. This example is similar to what we already shown you, but this is of great importance for us because the thing on the left, the example on the left, that's sufficient for us. We just need to be able to gather data, and we send that data to the front end. So it doesn't matter how it looks like, what it looks like. But what we do is we divide it up into different sections to give it more context. We try to add a description if it makes more sense and if it adds context to the user, but we also remove a description if it doesn't add any value. Yeah, the example on top I've already told. We change weird lingo to understandable human words, like entry and page. But it's also not only about making things more simple and dumbing things down. This is a great example of a colleague that sends us a message. It's actually a marketeer, and marketeers have usually a bit of background in code. And what she did, she was changing some things in the CMS of a client, and when she checked the actual output, she saw that it was kind of different, and so she was a bit, I would say bamboozled, confused. She was like panicking, like what's going wrong? Is the CMS broken? And that's actually because for some clients we make things more simple so that they don't have to be bothered about the correct technical implementations and about the correct semantics of things. We just take care of that. And that brings us seamless to the next example. Not all clients are the same. There's no one size fits all. So this is a great example. These two sections, for me as a backend developer, they're totally the same. Because what do I see? I see two sections. They both have a subtitle or an eyebrow or what you want to call it. A title, they each have 3 items. Each item has a title, a description, a link, and they can also have an icon, but it's just not shown in the left example. So for me, backend-wise, it's both exactly the same. The only thing that might be a bit different are colors and typography, a bit of styling. So the lazy developer solution would be to add a toggle to the CMS so that the client can just input their content and then they can toggle it on and switch the styling. But like I mentioned, that's a lazy developer option because that doesn't give them a lot of context, because what's the initial styling to what are you changing it? So the solution that for a lot of our clients works, not all of them, is the following one. We ask them up front what they want to add, and we give it a very clear label. And because we already know that they have seen the Figma files or they have seen the other pages that are correctly set up, we know that words like a card section and text column section, they are understandable. So we know that the user can use them. And for some users, this is sufficient. It works very well. But there's also other users who do need a bit of more options. Another great example here are, again, marketeers. Marketeers, they like to test different versions of their data. They want to see whether a dark page scores better than a light page, whether you receive more clicks if your button is styled differently. So for those clients, we know that they can handle a bit more options and that they actually need more options. But we also realize that some of the clients just don't want to be bothered by those. So there's just no one size fits all.
Okay, so we showed you 3 blind spots and some tips already, but now we're just going to highlight some other things that we do to try to tackle these. Like we said before, it's no one size fits all, but it gets you on the way to making a more sustainable product. Firstly, get to know the background of your clients. Know who they are, know what they do. That's usually what we all do, I think. Ask them the right questions. You just saw an amazing talk about how to ask these questions, so it should be no problem anymore. Do a kickoff workshop, explain to them how everything works, really get to know them, get into their heads, but also,
Yeah, I can do this one or you can do it. Also, try to get to know the tools that they are used to work with, whether they already have a CMS and whether they like it. Maybe they also work with marketing automation tools or things like that. So get to know what workflows and tools they are used to. And sometimes you can reuse some parts of it. Like we had a client who makes floors, and they particularly liked the way that our floors are listed in their old CMS. So we just remade it in the new one so that the client was easily familiarized with the new CMS as well. Second of all, make sure that all stakeholders are involved from the start of the project. And with all stakeholders, we not only mean clients, but also us developers, because from the very start, from the information architecture phase, it's already really important for us that we know how complex or how static or how modular we have to set up the backend. But also the wireframing phase is really important, and I think that's, I think we as developers are getting very annoying at that moment for designers, because we start to question and challenge everything that we see. We're like, oh, can we change the title? Oh, there's an image. Can we also turn it into an animation? Can it also be a video? Will the user be able to change this? And what options should we give the user then? So we ask lots of questions because they all affect the technical setup. And we keep them involved.
Yes, but also keep them involved. During the design, we were getting ready to start development, and the client was starting with their content creation. And during their content creation, they realized, oh, we forgot something. We want to explain this on a landing page. But this particular client actually went back to the Figma file and said, oh, but I saw you made this, and can we add it together? So they made a new component, just in text form, by things we already had. And that's very useful, because they saw a need, and we already designed it in a way. We just need to fine-tune something, and we in development were already prepared to make those components. So we could easily answer their need without having to start up a new phase, a new project, a new estimate. We could just already know, oh, we're going to combine these as well. Also, keep them involved during development. We as backend developers, especially with the CMS that we make, we do weekly or bi-weekly demos. We make a few features, and then we demo it to the client, so they already get to know how the CMS will work, how the things will be outputted, how they can change this. And during those phases and during those demos, they also give suggestions. But we were used to having that on the right side, or we were used to have that. And because it's so early in the process for us, we can also anticipate and work with it. We can change it more easily and maybe say, next week or next time that we see you, it will already be changed. So that's very valuable information during development. Compared to if you would just deliver the CMS and then do an entire manual and everything, you just have to restart the process again, designing, development, etc. And lastly, in keeping them involved is also train them to train others. If they can teach someone else how to work with the CMS, our job is accomplished. Because then they would know the ins and the outs, they would know how to work with it, they could make their own manuals. So we, as a start, provide our own manual, and they can edit them themselves, they can edit, they can do some comments. For example, a client can say, we used to call it the blah, blah, blah columns. They can change it in there and say, remember, for the older ones or the people that are working here longer, that was what we used to call it, but now we call it like that. So that really helps as well.
That brings us to the bottom line of this presentation. Treat your clients as actual users so that you can prevent sloppy hamburgers and make sure that your really nice user-friendly design is still really nice and user-friendly after it has been built. And also that you can receive very nice feedback of your clients, such as very user-friendly, looks like a CMS for dummies, but in fact, me as a dummy can do heaps with it. Because a good UX in the back equals a party in the front. Thank you.
Oh my gosh, fantastic. Thank you so much. Honestly, it's been, it doesn't happen every event, but did I learn about something like new in UX design that is so important that often gets overlooked. You guys might be like the hidden heroes of how to make a successful product, because the way that clients use it in the back end is so important to how it winds up on the front end. And I heard a really great quote from an IT guy that I'm working with right now on admin back end, basically. And he was like, I really like opinionated tools. And I was like, that's such a good quote. And only back-end UXers can help to make an opinionated tool. Like, give them freedom, but be opinionated.
Yeah.
So
That's a very good conclusion.
Right?
All right.
Does anyone have any questions for our speakers? We'll repeat them if there are.
All right.
It's very thorough and lots of good examples. So thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having us.
And really appreciate it. And yes, think about the back end, honestly. It's so important. I think it would solve so many headaches that I've had in my career to do it better.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
Okay.
Oh, and before you get off stage, I always forget to do this, but we have some special badges that we give to all of our speakers. You know, like you're in Scouts or a motorcycle gang or something. You know, you can put the patch on your sash or your leather jacket. I also have one for you, Rins, if you want to come up and grab it. We've always done this. It's like one of the oldest traditions. I don't know where it came from, but we've always loved it. And so we have a patch for our speakers to thank them for being here and to recognize them. So thanks so much. So feel free to stay and have a drink. I think there's still some food if you're still hungry. You know where the restrooms are. I just want to point out a couple quick things. Your dirty dishes, there is a spot for them. It's on the very edge of the bar over here. You'll see like a thing of water to put your silverware in. So please help us to clean up so that we don't get rats. And when you exit, you came up some stairs, but those are actually going to be closed now. So when you exit, please take the elevators, and those will take you downstairs. Our next event is, again, the last Tuesday of August, actually. We always take July off for holidays. So we'll be back on the 29th of August. We hope to see you there. And am I forgetting anything else? It's at ICAPS, another beautiful venue, actually. And since it's the summer, we'll actually be able to see the view out the window on the Sjouwke. The last couple events we've had there, it's been the winter and it's dark, which is a bummer. But in August, beautiful view from ICAPS. So hope to see you there and enjoy your evening. Thanks very much.